rules, but this has not become a mainstream subject of our discussions in the past month or so. These rules were introduced on April the 2nd, but they become operative today. What are these rules? These rules are that anybody who's lived, I mean, anybody read it as Hindus or Hindu civil servants or army officers who have lived in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir for the past 15 years or have served there, and anybody who studied there for 7 years and have passed 10th and 12th class examinations, they are entitled to get a domicile certificate. All civil servants, heads of or officials of statutory bodies or banks or educational institutions who have served there, they can also qualify for domicile certificates. Today, they have put that process on a fast track. What they're saying is that this process has to be completed in 15 days. I mean, once an applicant has filed his or her application, a certificate has to be issued in 15 days. If an official delays this process, he would be fined and he will have to pay 50,000 rupees, which would be deducted from his salary. They have also facilitated these non-natives by telling them that if they are not right now in Kashmir, if they are outside Kashmir in India or in any other part of the world, they can apply for their residence, permanent residence. This category also includes migrants, and there are hundreds of thousands of migrants from all over India who are living in Jammu and Kashmir, and they are from different states. They are also saying that West Pakistan, the so-called West Pakistan refugees, they are also hundreds of thousands, or more than 250,000. They, the families and children of Safai Karamcharis, all these, I mean, the sweepers, everybody can, provided they are Hindus, because I mean, this provision is not for Muslims. They can settle there in Kashmir. According to our own estimation, around 2 million Hindus would be settled in the first go, and then floodgates for migration from India would be opened, and Kashmir would be turned into a Hindu state, a Hindu Rashtra, and the Muslim majority there would be reduced. Now, this is one thing, and India initiated this process under the cover of COVID-19 pandemic, because as you know that Kashmir right now, the occupied territory, is under triple lockdowns. One lockdown dates back to 1989. The second started on August the 5th last year. And the third was imposed in the form of COVID-19 lockdown. Now, the previous ones, particularly the one which started on August the 5th, is not a lockdown, it's a siege. And in fact, its purpose is to kill people, whereas the purpose of the COVID-19 is to save lives, so they can't be conflated or put in the same basket. Under the cover of COVID-19, they have introduced these measures and they are fast-tracking them. Now, they have started another process, I mean, under the cover of COVID-19. They started killing young boys in fake encounters. They call these cordon search operations. They go to these villages, and in villages they go to their houses, they terrorize people, they vandalize their property, they kill people, they blind them, and they blast their houses. And when they kill these young men, they say that they were terrorists, and they have neutralized them. As a matter of fact, these are fake state encounters that are taking place there. Indians were betting on the success of their lockdown, and they thought that under the COVID-19 lockdown and the general restriction that they had imposed, that Kashmiris would not come out of their houses. But after the martyrdom of Riaz, thousands of people have come out defying all these restrictions because these killers, these terrorists, I mean, these in uniform, they are not only killing these people, but they are also killing and not releasing their dead bodies to their families. And this has reinvigorated and galvanized anger in the entire territory. And there have been armed demonstrations, there have been demonstrations, and there has been armed resistance. And the Indians have used live ammunition, they have used pellet firing shotguns and automatic weapons to quell these demonstrations. They haven't succeeded in doing that. Let me also tell you that to divert attention from these crimes against humanity that they are committing in the occupied territory, India has intensified its violations of the ceasefire along the line of control. So what they do that I think in this very year, in the past 5 months, I mean, we haven't completed 5 months, they have killed more than, they have violated the ceasefire line for more than 1,100 times. And they have killed people, they have caused damage to the infrastructure, and they have caused devastation, as a matter of fact. And what they did was, you should know that they target civilians in all the areas along the line of control. Whereas the policy of our armed forces is that when you fire back, you engage and target their military posts, not the civilians, because we consider these civilians to be our own citizens. So in order to frustrate or block this kind of fine distinction that we make between the army officers there or army personnel there and the civilians, the armed forces or the occupation forces there moved to the thickly populated villages. And there they've been using these villages as human shields, because if we fire back, then of course we would be targeting civilians along with the armed personnel. Let me also tell you that lately they have started using heavy weaponry that includes artillery, that includes heavy caliber mortar and automatic weapons. Now, India has also unleashed a campaign of lies, which I call fog of lies, because they think that the reality would be lost in this fog of lies. And they have accused Pakistan of pushing COVID-19 patients to Azad Kashmir, accused Azad Kashmir of pushing COVID-19 patients to the occupied territory. They've said that we have started resistance or armed resistance all over again. And they are saying that in Azad Kashmir, we have launch pads, that we are sending troops across, to not the troops, what they call militants across the line of control, or terrorist line of control. But this is all lies, and they're doing so deliberately. The target is not us, because we won't believe them, because nothing of the sort is happening on this side of the line of control in Azad Kashmir or in Pakistan. They are not targeting the international community, because there's no credibility in these lies and these falsehoods that they peddle. They are targeting their own internal population, I mean population in India, which is being fed on this toxic diet of Hindutva, this violent extremism. So they are their target, and they want to brainwash them and indoctrinate them that there is an enemy which is trying to target Indian occupation forces and also the Kashmiri population over there. Now, this is, I have said time and again that this is they have taken a leaf from Goebbels' book, his playbook, when he said they tell lies frequently and with confidence, and people after a while would start believing it. Now, let me tell you that in regard to our overall policy towards Kashmir, there's a disequilibrium in what India is doing and what we are doing. What have we been doing? I think that after August the 5th, we've been reaching out to the international community with success. First, the international community itself started paying attention to the issue because of these outrageous steps taken by India. And the international community included primarily the international media, also human rights organizations, parliaments. The United Nations Security Council held sessions after a gap of about 50 years. So that was an achievement of sorts. And there have been some statements from the High Commissioner for Human Rights, from the United Nations Secretary General. So, and our government, I mean, the government of Pakistan has been quite active, and there's been, in the immediate aftermath, they reached out to every country in the world. And during the United Nations General Assembly session, the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, between the two of them, they tried to contact as many leaders as possible. So this was the positive side. The other side is that our posture right now in regard to India is defensive, because we are saying that if they attack Azad Kashmir, or if they dare do anything in Gilgit-Baltistan, or if they accelerate proxy war in Pakistan, we would give a fitting response. What we're telling to the world is that we believe in peace and security, and we believe in peaceful means, and that we are not going to give or take any offensive measures. Let me contrast it with the Indian policy. The Indian policy is, and this is before and after August the 5th, their policy is that they're using all tools, the diplomatic tools, because they've gone to the capitals of the world and also the multilateral institutions. Second, they have used international financial institutions against us. They have activated hostile membership in the FATF against Pakistan to squeeze Pakistan financially. And so they're using all diplomatic tools. They're also using political means. For instance, I mean, in India, they have started a campaign against Muslim citizens, and somehow they have clubbed that anti-Muslim campaign with the steps that they have taken in Kashmir. Anybody who dare say that what they're doing in Kashmir is not legitimate, he or she is dubbed as a traitor. So these are the political means that they are using. And the last tool that they're using is military tool. And they have a very heavy-handed policy in Kashmir. There are 900,000 troops there. They're fighting a war, and they're fighting a war against unarmed civilians. According to their own statistics, the largest number of militants so far has been 250. And these are young boys who have fled their homes, and they're hiding, and they're ill-trained and ill-equipped. And they are pitted against 900,000 occupation troops. Now, this is one thing that I wanted to highlight. The second thing is that they have also waged a war, a psychological warfare against Pakistan, and also backed by military threats that they are going to attack Azad Kashmir, so that Azad Kashmir is defensive, and we say that if you attack, we will do this and that, and if you interfere in Gilgit-Baltistan, we'll do this and that. So what they say, they used to be called defensive offensive. Now this is offensive offensive policy that they are pursuing. Let me tell you that what are the options that we have before us. Now the options, because of our stated policy, I'll outline some of these options. But before I do that, I mean, the seminars like these that we have been having, they've been about awareness raising and not about policy making. And they have either endorsed the position or the posture of the state, or some critics have unleashed veiled or not so unveiled criticism against what we are doing. So what happens is that these discussions do not feed into policymaking processes. Because I was talking about awareness raising as if we were educating ourselves and our audience and like preaching to the choir, as a matter of fact, and telling them about the developments that are taking place in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir or in India, or about India's designs. But we have not come up, I mean, I'm not talking about you because you've been very proactive and dynamic, but most of the time we come up with lots of shoulds and ought tos, but we do not have concrete recommendations for a change or in our policy or posture or a refinement of our response to this very unusual and unprecedented situation. Now, the options that we have right now are that first, I think that we must intensify our communication to the President of the Security Council, to United Nations General Assembly, Secretary General, United Nations Secretary General, with the President of the General Assembly, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, because war is possible. Under the present circumstances, war is possible by intent or by miscalculation. And the war can turn nuclear because there are tactical nuclear weapons on both sides. There are conventional capabilities. There are deployments. And there's a tinderbox here. And therefore, war is a possibility. The United Nations needs to be alerted and major powers need to be involved. And the second thing that I want to say is that the think tanks like yours should directly communicate with the multilateral forum's leadership, whether it is the United Nations Secretary General, President of the Security Council, or the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross. These are relevant stakeholders in what is happening, because in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, international law has been violated flagrantly, and these applicable laws that are being violated are 4th Geneva Convention, ICC statute. You also have the additional Protocol 1. You also have United Nations Security Council resolutions. You have some reports of the special rapporteurs of the previous Human Rights Commission and so on. And the crimes that are being committed there can be listed as crimes against humanity, genocide, war crimes, and ethnic cleansing. So the international community or the multilateral institutions are directly relevant here. So we must engage them because this lack of engagement is making India's narrative prevalent. The other thing is that we will have to revise and revisit our overall posture, because if you're telling India that you're only going to pursue a moral path and you're going to launch and sustain a diplomatic and political campaign, you're telling them that they can do whatever they like inside the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. They can present it to the world as fait accompli, and we won't be able to do much about it. Of course, we would be communicating with the rest of the world. The rest of the world was engaged, focused during 3 months last year. That was August, September, and October. And then our attention internally, because of internal politics, was diverted completely. And the world also started paying attention to other issues like Brexit or President Trump's impeachment, or many other, now COVID-19 and so on. So the world community's attention has drifted away Let's understand that very clearly. Now, another thing that I want to highlight is that even in our national narrative, I do not see the kind of primacy that Kashmir should have, because it is good to use a lot of rhetoric and then express lots of aspirations or be didactic, and say that we ought to do this, we ought to do that, either it's the responsibility of the Foreign Office or it's the responsibility of the government or of this institution or that institution. And it's a kind of catharsis. And then you say that as far as we are concerned, as citizens, as stakeholders in different positions, we don't have any responsibility. And therefore, our task becomes much easier. So that's why I would say give primacy to the Jammu and Kashmir in your national discourse first, and then the world would be attentive to what you're trying to say. What we have done, I mean, personally, I can tell you that what I have done, and I have been striving to keep the issue of Jammu and Kashmir alive during COVID-19. Everybody went silent all over the world. Also, we are holding these webinars, and I'm grateful to you that you are holding this webinar here in Pakistan, and quite a few others have been held in different universities and academic institutions, and I'm grateful to you that this is, but also internationally, we've engaged French intellectuals and journalists and parliamentarians and British parliamentarians. We're reaching out to the people in the Gulf region, also in the Americas or North America. But I would say my appeal to you is that keep the issue alive, because India's primary objective is that this issue should disappear from the radar screen of the international community or from the international agenda. Now, I can tell you that no grandstanding would help us. This is a palliative. I mean, we do a lot of grandstanding, and we think that we have moral high ground and others don't, but this doesn't make any impact, because the international community's response right now to these horrendous developments in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir has been muted. Let's face this reality, because with the exception of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and it was again not their Secretary General, but their General Secretariat, which issued a statement condemning new domicile rules. Now, I emphasize these new domicile rules again and again, because if 2 or 3 years down the road, you do not have the kind of demographic composition that Kashmir used to have till August the 5th last year, then which Kashmir are you going to talk about in the international community? All those people from India who would be settled, who would be given permanent residence in the occupied territory, would you propose that they are evacuated? Or would this be a fait accompli like the one which Netanyahu is going to Netanyahu, backed by President Trump, is giving to the world in regard to Palestine and the West Bank? So what I'm saying is that these are fleeting moments, and we have to, in fact, galvanize support all around the world. And one point was made, and let me tell you that this is the last point that I'm making, is that the new Labour leader, Keir Starmer, had met this Indian lobby, and he gave them assurances, and he gave an ambiguous statement. And our friends in the United Kingdom and in the British Parliament, in the Labour Party, of course, they lobbied with him, they contacted him, they conveyed their anger to Mr. Starmer, and Mr. Starmer has written back to Mr. Andrew Gwynn, and he's rectified his position to some extent. But I think that the apprehensions that have been expressed by General Jaffrey are correct, and we are facing an avalanche. This is not paranoia. This is like reading the writing on the wall. And so I'd appeal to everybody. In fact, I have to leave after concluding my remarks because of some other prior engagements. But I thank you once again, General Jaffrey, and I'm sure that the cast that you have assembled, it is so impressive with such diverse and rich diplomatic background and academic background. And I'm sure that this discussion would once again lead to some conclusion, like you compile these conclusions and disseminate them to the stakeholders. So I wish you luck, and I think that I'd be looking forward to reading the script of your deliberations and your recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your speech. And definitely, we will be compiling a report and we will be sending a copy across to you for your reading and also for the implementation of the points. Now we will go to Lahore. In Lahore, we have Lieutenant General Khalid Maqbool, retired. He is the former governor of Punjab province, and he will be talking on the latest situation on the line of control and possibility of a military conflict. General Khalid Maqbool, sir. General Khalid Maqbool, sir, आपको mic unmute करना होगा, sir. You have to unmute your mic yourself, sir. ऊपर unmute करना होगा, sir, इसको. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Khalid. India is following a grand strategy with Pakistan, with Kashmir also. And at that level, we should look at all the actions that India is committing as part of the grand strategy. And that grand strategy, India is trying to destabilize both Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, because they know tomorrow when this area would economically develop because of the Chinese investment, the Chinese influence will rise in this region. So that is how they are targeting us and China. At other, I would say, strategic level, India's design is to weaken Pakistan. So by destabilizing both Kashmir and Gilgit, and also by threatening Pakistan, that's a message to Pakistan directly. And at third operation level, India wants to contain and also make sure, send a message to the freedom fighters that they have no place to look towards for help. It is with this strategy that India has undertaken all the military actions against Pakistan, particularly with reference to Kashmir ceasefire violation. In days to come, I think we can expect increased activities on line of control through ceasefire violation, and in which our civilian population would be primarily targeted. The good news is that the Pakistan Army has been able to respond very effectively to these violations, and we can't hurt the civilians, but I think we have given a good reply to the Indian troops. At other level, I think a possibility of, even Prime Minister said yesterday, the false flag operation is quite imminent or quite practical, because here is a message to the world that the freedom movement in Kashmir is driven not by the indigenous groups, but by the militants that Pakistan is sending to Kashmir. So we should expect these incidents, these false flag operations. Again, the good news is that the couple of times the Indians tried, our troops have retaliated very effectively, and if anything, even post Pulwama, and the Indians have suffered more. Now the real issue is, will India expand its military activities and launch limited or larger operations along the line of control. I think the possibility cannot be ruled out. Indians have a set of forces there that give them this capability. Now, if the freedom movement inside the occupied Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir was to expand, the Indians will create a rationale that Pakistan is interfering and therefore we are going in to destroy the bases of so-called freedom fighters. And if the Kashmir situation inside the Jammu and Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, was to ever appear to be getting out of control, or if Pakistan was to show weakness, if the Indians destabilizing operations in Gilgit-Baltistan or Azad Kashmir were to prove effective, I think we should not rule out India's larger military operations against the Azad Kashmir territory. That would primarily be to weaken Pakistan, which I had said is the grand strategy of the Indian government, particularly Mr. Modi government. Again, I think on all this, the good news has been that whenever Indians have attempted, Pakistan has, in the context of meeting the Indian threat, met them very successfully. But we've also been able to tell the world that there is a limit beyond which the scope and limit of the war cannot be controlled by us. So specifically to answer your question, I would say that we should not rule out the Azad Kashmir border to becoming active, and Indian activities starting from ceasefire violation to so-called surgical strike to reasonably mid-size war cannot be ignored. Pakistan must remain prepared for it, and it will all depend what is the intensity of the freedom movement within occupied Kashmir. If the freedom movement was to remain potent, India will always have to think that in case they were to increase activities along the border, these borders will become then meaningless. Then who would be able to control the movement of people from this side to that side? Indians will always be thinking of this eventuality in their mind whenever they want to or they think of enlarging the border. But that these borders can become active, lethal, and a situation of war-like can emerge here is the reality that Pakistan should always consider as a great possibility and always stand ready to thwart such Indian designs. Thank you, Khalid.
Thank you very much, sir. Now we will go to Dr. Maleeha Lodhi. Dr. Maleeha Lodhi is the former Pakistan's representative to UN, and she has remained ambassador in various countries. And she will be talking on the role of United Nations in the resolution of Kashmir issue and the future prospects. Dr. Maleeha Lodhi.
Thank you, General Jaffrey, for including me in this seminar. And of course, I'm delighted to join such a distinguished panel, some of whom have been former colleagues like Ambassador Abdul, Basit, and others. So with that, let me start by saying first a few words about the state of play today in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. As you all know, the pandemic has given the Indian government a cover and a further handle to intensify the repression and take even more draconian steps at a time when the world is preoccupied by fighting COVID-19. And countries obviously are focused and have turned inwards on themselves, while human rights organizations too are distracted and their media attention is fixed squarely on the health crisis. This is to be expected, but this is the state of play. And the Indian intensification of repression has come on the back of the toxic environment created in India by the Modi government, where the most vicious Muslim bashing is going on, and the coronavirus crisis is being used as the latest pretext in the BJP's communal politics and campaign. In occupied Kashmir, the intensification of repression has seen in recent weeks, recent months, critical medical supplies being denied, to people, of journalists being arrested or charged on frivolous grounds in an effort to silence all voices. And of course, the most egregious violations of human rights continues. This means that leaders continue in detention. The communication blackout is also in place. Night raids take place. Incommunicado detentions also continue. And of course, we see reports of widespread torture. And all this under the cover of darkness imposed since last August. So Kashmiris today live in a state of multiple deprivations. The prolonged occupation for the last 72 years plus that has taken away their fundamental liberties and prevented them from exercising their right to self-determination, and then the brutality of the Modi-led BJP government that illegally annexed Jammu and Kashmir last August, and now the unspeakable cruelty of facing a health emergency with their hands tied and their lips sealed. I think each one of us can now directly feel some of the pain of a lockdown that the Kashmiris have endured since the past 9 months, as we ourselves have been practicing some degree of social isolation. Now let me move to the international community, and let me say that we should be clear that the international community has a responsibility to address this dire situation. But that, of course, doesn't mean that it will do so. A lot of whether it will do so depends on what Pakistan is able and willing to do. Pakistan should not pause or relent on its diplomatic campaign. The Kashmiris look to us, and we cannot let them down. But then policy has to be consistent and not be confined to a tweet here or there, or the usual kind of perfunctory statements made by the foreign ministry. I mean, these are there, but that's not enough. As for the role of the UN, as you all know, the United Nations has long-standing obligations to find a peaceful settlement of occupied Kashmir. It is, along with Palestine, one of the oldest items on the Security Council agenda. And the agenda item is actually called the India-Pakistan question. And it is under this agenda item that letters have regularly been sent by every government in Pakistan to the Security Council, especially since the uprising of the 1990s and subsequently calling attention to the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir and the Indian atrocities. And of course, Pakistan has consistently called for the necessity for a resolution of this dispute in accordance with these Security Council resolutions. These, Pakistan has pointed out time and again, is required for the maintenance of regional and international peace and security. So this is the formal position. It's something that Masood Khan, the president of AJK, also indicated. But let me now go to the world of real politics. So let me go back to last year, as that would situate the issue in the context of big power politics and may help to throw light on the likely international dynamics in the post-pandemic period. I was at the United Nations as my country's permanent representative and ambassador when on August the 5th, India illegally annexed Jammu and Kashmir in violation of UN Security Council resolutions and international law. Let me cite just one provision as an example. Para 2 of Security Council Resolution 38 of 1948 states clearly that neither party can bring about any material change in the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. So as I said, this is only one provision of one resolution that was violated. And let's not forget that the right of self-determination is enshrined in the UN Charter. And of course, the series of UN Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir have further reinforced the notion that the Kashmiris must have the right to determine their own destiny. So with that, let me briefly share what went into ensuring the first meeting of the Security Council to discuss the Kashmir issue in over half a century. I'm sure you will recall that the last one that exclusively discussed Jammu and Kashmir, last meeting, was in 1965. After that, meetings have taken place. After the 1971 war that took place, many meetings have taken place after our nuclear tests. Meetings took place discussing India-Pakistan. But there was no meeting that exclusively discussed Jammu and Kashmir. So, we set about trying to achieve this meeting in the wake of what India had done last August. And clearly, a great deal of effort went into this in New York, in Islamabad, and of course in different capitals of the 15 members of the Security Council. India, as you could imagine, lobbied very hard against convening this meeting. It went all over the place. It lobbied capitals. It lobbied members of the council in New York. But in the end, India failed to stop this meeting from taking place. And the meeting was convened on the 16th of August. As I said, the first exclusive one to discuss Kashmir in 53 years. This was important because it reaffirmed the international nature of the dispute and nullified the Indian claim that Kashmir was an internal matter. This was part of the Indian narrative and the Indian propaganda and the disinformation that they were spouting all over the world. So the meeting itself nullified that. Now, the discussion in the meeting also reaffirmed that the Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir, which call for a plebiscite, are alive and remain central to the resolution of the dispute. But the fact that it took over half a century for this meeting to take place was a reflection of big power dynamics and how some members of the Permanent Five have over the years stood in the way of implementation of UN Security Council resolution on Kashmir. We had, as you would all know and expect, China leading the effort at our request. The UK was in favor. The Russians, we managed to keep neutral with China's help, but France opposed the meeting from even taking place. The US did not oppose convening of the meeting, but many diplomats there told me, and it's hard for me to verify the extent to which this is true, that the US egged France on behind the scenes. I don't know whether this is true, but a number of diplomats did share this with me. But what was clear to us was that both the US and France opposed any Security Council statement being issued after this meeting, whose draft was ready. This wasn't issued, but the meeting went ahead. So, stepping back from this, I think this illustrates a grim reality. The non-implementation of UN Security Council resolutions on Kashmir, not one, but 11 of them, has been a consequence. This non-implementation has been a consequence of big power dynamics. Originally, Russia played the role of the prime protector of India's interests on Kashmir, but over time, almost 3 of the 5 permanent members have acted that way at different times. This is not meant as a lament, but a call for action and a call for our diplomatic efforts to be intensified. Even when we were lobbying to have this meeting, the 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council, some of them we hardly had any relationship with because we had never anticipated or foreseen way before that we would need, for example, a country like Poland. Poland had the presidency of the Security Council at that time. I mean, the Polish ambassador happened to be a woman and I had a good relationship with her. I'm not saying that made a difference, but sometimes you need to use whatever diplomatic tools you have at your disposal to see how you can forge new relationships when you don't really have very strong relationships. India, on the other hand, did have strong relationships with many of the non-permanent members of the Security Council. And I think it's important to mention at least one Muslim member of the council at that time, which was very helpful to us, and that was Kuwait. Kuwait was helpful. It spoke up in this meeting. It talked about the human rights violations in the occupied valley and beyond. So I think we should remember also later who stood by us and how we can then further leverage their support for future actions. Now, as we all know, India's actions before and after the pandemic have triggered multiple crises which are continuing. We have a human rights crisis in the disputed territory. We have a humanitarian crisis which is exacerbated because of the pandemic. And of course, we have a crisis in relations between Pakistan and India. As General Khalid Maqbool was also underlining, the situation on the line of control and the escalation that takes place there from time to time is one which is fraught with great danger. Now, the relations with India, obviously, very quickly, a few words about this, because these will continue on a turbulent course with no respite, I think, until Modi is no longer in power. And even then, there's a big question mark. So our foreign policy challenge is an imposing one. How do we deal with the situation that has been created since last year, since August 5, and then, as I said, worsened throughout subsequently? How do we keep the issue of occupied Kashmir on the agenda of the international community when so many other urgent issues dominate the global agenda? And how do we press our Kashmir policy and preserve our principled stance and mobilize support from the international community when the issue has been internationalized in an unprecedented way because of the actions of last year? But when the focus of the global community is going to remain inwards for some time to deal with the pandemic, the UN's role, as I explained before, and we can discuss this in the interaction. I don't want to go on and on. I think others have to also be given a chance to participate. But the UN's role is, let's remember, the UN is an intergovernmental organization. It's not a supranational organization. It is, and it can only do what its member states want it to do. And in this, the P5 obviously exercise inordinate, should we say, inordinate power, but they're the ones who can be decisive in what the UN can do on this issue. So the UN role is limited by what members of the P5 will allow. The UN Secretary General, I came to know him very well. He has consistently offered his good offices to mediate. Prime Minister met him, and the former Prime Minister met him. Every time he has said, I'm ready to mediate. Every time that I had a meeting with him on Jammu and Kashmir, he said, I'm ready. My offices are available for mediation. But each time, of course, India spurned these efforts at mediation in line with its own policy, which is, long-standing. So every time, as I said, I met him, the SG said that unless both parties agree, I cannot do much beyond calling for a peaceful resolution, which of course he has been doing, and other UN officials, especially the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, they have been saying, voicing their concern about the grave situation, especially after last August. So, I mean, these statements are extremely helpful, but an active UN role is, as I said, limited by big power politics. So what should Pakistan do? We should continue, I think, to work on the permanent and non-permanent members of the Security Council. Obviously, the P5 are more important, but so are the other members of the Council. And I think we need, in our own country, we need to evolve clarity in our Kashmir policy. And above all, in the objectives that we seek. What is it that we seek? Is it an end to the lockdown? Is it a reversal of abrogation of Article 370? I mean, surely not. That is only, that's only something that led to a certain situation. Do we seek an end to human rights abuses? Or do we, as part of our principal policy for 72 years plus, seek the attainment of the right of self-determination for the Kashmiri people? So I think, or do we sort of seek all of the above? In which case, I think our narrative will have to be very clear on the international level, because the people at the international level need to know what is it that Pakistan wants, what is in the realm of possibility. The second point I would say, and I'm going to round off now, we need consistency in our diplomatic campaign on Kashmir. We don't, we can't have an on-off approach in the post-pandemic world, whether the approach is directed at the UN and the members of the Council, or at key bilateral capitals, or generally at the OIC. But we need consistency, because if we don't have consistency, countries tend to think that we make all this noise for domestic purpose and domestic effect, and that we are not that serious internationally. So, we don't want that perception to gain ground. I'm not saying it's there, but we don't want such a perception to take ground. To gain ground. So we have to match the noise we make at home with real diplomatic efforts overseas. And I think we need to keep pushing the boundaries at the international level. I see a reluctance to do that. There is a degree of caution which borders sometimes on diplomatic docility, I would say. No risk, no gain. You have to take risks in order to achieve, whatever you want to achieve. And I think two diplomatic steps are urgent once we are out of this pandemic, and perhaps work on this should start now. We don't have to wait for the pandemic to end, because we have no idea how long it will continue. Because you see, the danger would be that Kashmir would fade from international focus once the pandemic ends and the spotlight is elsewhere. It's on so many other big issues. There's a Sino-US near confrontation going on. I mean, the tensions between big powers, all of that is going to be take center stage. So I think the two things we do need to do is to, even virtually, we should call for a ministerial meeting of the OIC. This was never done. The work towards it had started, but we weren't able to pull this off. I think we need to do this. And I think we need a special session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, exclusively on Indian occupied Kashmir. I fail to understand why we didn't build on the momentum achieved by the Security Council meeting in August last year. Why we didn't follow that up by a meeting in Geneva. A far easier task, I think, than getting a Security Council meeting. I think lastly, we also need to mobilize and sustain a national consensus on our Kashmir policy. And that means cross-party involvement and inclusion. This is not an issue for just one political party or for one stakeholder. This is, this is a fundamental issue, the core and the pillar of our foreign policy for 72 years plus. And I think we need to continue to mobilize this national consensus and evolve clarity on our policy. And I think, to conclude, I remain an optimist. I feel that this night of oppression, which is long, but might can never be right. One day, right will be might. And therefore, it is so imperative for Pakistan to stand firm and deal imaginatively with the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Now we will go to Ambassador Riaz Khokhar. Ambassador Riaz Khokhar remained Pakistan's foreign secretary also. Sir, and he'll be speaking on the Pakistan's multilateral efforts to resolve the Kashmir issue. Sir, you can speak now.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My greetings to all the panelists. We've heard two very excellent presentations. I will, of course, focus, as you have said, on our role in multilateral diplomacy. First of all, of course, the epic struggle of the Kashmiris has to be saluted. They have made enormous sacrifices, there's no doubt about that, and they continue to make it. Clearly, what Modi has done since August last year is abominable and almost criminal. They are very clear. They are committed to a policy on which they may not have a national consensus, but the overwhelming majority of the people of India support this negative policy in Kashmir, this horrible, criminally oriented policy in Kashmir. It's an armed military camp. Human rights violations are huge, and they are committed to a policy of incremental genocide. And clearly, as President Masood pointed out, that this whole policy about domiciles is their objective is to change the demographic character of Kashmir. Now, there has been a long history of multilateral diplomacy. The bulk of the achievements were in the period 1948, 1957. This is when you have, as Dr. Lodhi pointed out, the bulk of the resolutions were produced during that period. And there was a common understanding that this is a dispute. Secondly, that it will have to be resolved through a plebiscite, that it will have to be a fair and impartial plebiscite, and that it will have to be done under the aegis of the United Nations. These are the fundamentals. But let me be very frank. I think as far as realpolitik and big power diplomacy is concerned, or big power interests are concerned, they were evident even in the 50s. The United States played a positive role, but it was not decisive. These especially the Western countries could have played a decisive role. China was not a member of the UN at that time. It was a Chiang Kai-shek government that was represented. Now, 2-3 very fundamental points. No Indian leader has been sincere about Kashmir or finding a solution of the Jammu and Kashmir. Mahatma Gandhi shed crocodile tears for the Kashmiris. Jawaharlal Nehru was a congenital liar. He's the one who made false promises to the Kashmiris, to Pakistan, to the international community. But it is now clear, the records are now very clear, that he was never committed to plebiscite. Even in 1948, he wasn't committed to. I mean, whatever he did at the United Nations, of course, as we all know, that India took the dispute to the United Nations, but that was all to gain time. And they gained time, no doubt about it. And in 54, 55, they sort of changed their mind publicly. But in 1952, he wrote to Sheikh Abdullah. 1952, he wrote to Sheikh Abdullah that plebiscite is out. That is mainly because the UN can do nothing. Pakistan is weak. We will develop economically, and eventually Pakistan will have no choice but to accept whatever solution that the Indians have in mind. As you know, that much of the activity was during the period 1948 and 57. But even in those days, I'm sorry to say that there was a certain level of instability in Pakistan. How many, after the death of the Qaid and after the death of Liaquat Ali Khan, how many prime ministers did we change? So India took advantage of all that. Then, of course, we had, a period when the UN was mediating during the period 1948-53. After that, there were some bilateral discussions and certain powers were involved. And finally, of course, we tread into the 62, the development in 62 and 63, when the Sino-Indian conflict took place. And amazingly, it was Prime Minister Noon, and I think followed by President Ayub, who talked about this joint defense within India. It was absolutely quite ridiculous at that time. Anyway, then came the 65 war, and as Dr. Lodhi has pointed out, after 65 war and the last UN Security Council session, we really didn't have much to go with. Of course, this is absolutely valid that we've had what you call a knee-jerk reaction as far as keeping the issue alive from time to time. And annual statements are made at the General Assembly. Our PRs are very active in making statements. But in the ultimate analysis, it's not really moving. Now, the reality is that today, India is committing violations of the most inhuman kind. And no one, the voices are heard. The question is, how many capitals in the world actually came out with statements condemning the Indian action in August? Since then, there have been, from time to time, references to human rights violations, etc. But no major country has really, called on Delhi to seize this activity and to sit down and talk to Pakistan. Nobody has really done that, particularly the US has not. I mean, in a way, Modi took this as a cue to continue with the kind of aggressive policies that he's doing. Now, what have they done? It's not only annexation. They've changed the map. They do not, well, eventually they will probably say that the LOC doesn't exist. They have done all this in violation of UN charters, all the bilateral agreements between India and Pakistan, similar agreement, Lahore or whatever. And of course, now they are in a position not to talk to us. In fact, that is a consensus in India, other than the odd voices being heard, the so-called liberals and so on and so forth. Nobody is really pushing Modi to engage in a dialogue with Pakistan. I think this is the real problem. Of course, we have to be active. Of course, we have to keep it alive. But in the ultimate analysis, it's a question of what exactly is Pakistan looking for? Just to keep the issue alive, or it wants to do something to help the Kashmiris? And this is where the expectation of the Kashmiris is. What is Pakistan doing other than making statements, other than an annual statement at the General Assembly? As Dr. Lodhi has pointed out, we had difficulty in getting these Security Council meetings. These were consultations. They were not really meetings in that sense. There was no statement after that. And quite rightly, I think, France, we know France and the United States were clearly against any statement coming out from there. And it's while our people are continuing to make efforts. I mean, the Secretary General has been very kind. He has been very gracious. He has responded to many of the letters that were sent to him by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. But Secretary General, unfortunately, United Nations as an institution has weakened. It is mainly because some of the big powers, particularly the United States, has no respect for the United Nations. The way the president has been making statements against UN organizations, he has cut down on expenses, etc. The question is, where do we stand in the international community today? Yes, we can make all the effort. Yes, we can activate our diplomacy. We can act take government into confidence in various capitals. But in the ultimate analysis, how do we turn this into a diplomatic force that will pressurize India into being more reasonable or seizing human rights violations and also engaging in talks? And as far as I'm concerned, I see no prospects of any talks with India. They are very clear. They are going ahead. And the prospects of a conflict are, well, possible, I would say even probable, because they have a mindset and they want to see this, they want to see a closure from their point of view. India wants a closure from its point of view, and it seems I'm not saying that they are achieving it, but clearly they find that while Pakistan is making all these statements and while Pakistan is talking about action on the LOC, the move or jawab, and also, but how do we help the Kashmiris in concrete terms? That's the real problem. Now, that's only possible if there is a national consensus in this country. Unfortunately, there has not been a national consensus. I mean, we talk about the statements being made in fact, if you recall, the National Assembly session on Kashmir, it took them 2 days to come to pass a resolution, something that should have happened in 15 minutes. So we painted a very poor picture of ourselves. And I think even now, is there a consensus on some of the fundamental issues that the country is facing? In my opinion, frankly, no. So the point I'm trying to emphasize is that if we are serious about Kashmir, and as you know, freedom movements continue, they become sluggish, but they have to be kept alive. Do we have the conviction and shall we say, do we have a plan on how we can support the Kashmiris? They are fighting and they will do their best to keep going, but for how long? Yes, fair enough, they've made enormous sacrifices, but they are facing a military machine which is, it's like a meat grinder. And that's what they, for Pakistan, that is the real difficulty. Now, we talk about OIC. Well, OIC has made the odd statement from time to time condemning, but the question is, which Arab country actually came out in total support of Pakistan? I mean, they made noises, but did not put pressure on India. They had the capacity. I mean, they had the economic power, certainly before this current, crisis, COVID-19 crisis. The point I'm trying to make is we have to think on our own. We have to think in terms of how we can help. And, simple diplomacy is, well, certainly it's one of the major tools we have in our hands. But the question is, how do we mobilize this? Now, we have had support, some support from the international media. But then, media moves from place to place. I mean, tomorrow there's, let's say, a crisis in Yemen or Libya or in the Indo-Pacific, in the Pacific region between the United States and China. All these things are now getting into a very serious situation. US is applying pressure on China. US is applying pressure on Iran. So the attention is diverted. Kashmir, people are aware of it. And people are witnessing the kind of human rights violations that have probably taken place only during their Nazi time. The point I'm trying to make now is we have to take the decision. But sadly, we've had prime ministers in this country who actually thought that Kashmir was a liability. I mean, this is sad. There have been prime ministers who have refused to even mention Kashmir. There have been prime ministers who would not mention Kulbhushan Yadav's name at all. So we have to sit down as a nation, whether Parliament, I don't know whether Parliament is really the forum, but we should sit down and have a clear-cut strategy on Kashmir. What do we do? How do we support them? And mere words and mere statements are not going to help. The Prime Minister made a very fine speech last year. Dr. Lodhi was in New York at that time. She made a contribution herself. But the point I'm trying to make is, after that, what has happened? After that, not much has happened. We are facing a very serious health crisis in the country, and the attention is somewhat divided. So I would say that our institutions have a very specific responsibility to make up their mind. How do you support the Kashmiris? And India's main approach has been and there were indications that this was going to happen. India's main approach is that Pakistan, unfortunately, is giving a fractured political picture. Economically, it's weak. Okay, militarily, it's strong, but it's not going to be able to move. I think that was one of the decisive factors in their calculations. I would just want to conclude yes, I agree with the panelists that we have to make a very determined, very clear diplomatic effort on how to mobilize, but it seems to me that our options are frankly limited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And definitely at the end, we'll bother you again for the question answer session. Now we will go to Ambassador Basit. Ambassador Abdul Basit remained the High Commissioner of Pakistan in India, and his topic for today is Indian policy of Hindutva and Akhand Bharat vis-a-vis Kashmir issue. Ambassador Basit, sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. And first of all, my greetings to all the distinguished panelists and whoever is watching us. And I'm grateful to your think tank for inviting me as well to say a few words about Kashmir and Hindutva. I think everything has already been said very eloquently by the previous speakers, particularly Dr. Maleeha Lodhi and Ambassador Riaz Khokhar, and there is hardly anything for me to add. But we have been saying all along, Hindutva is not something new, which we came to know about it on the 5th of August. Even back in 2014, when I was the High Commissioner in New Delhi, I used to write regularly to Islamabad that revocation of Articles 370 and 35A is a foregone conclusion, and we have to do something about it, come up with some countermeasures in order to prevent that. But unfortunately, as was very rightly pointed out by Dr. Lodhi and Ambassador Khokhar, that we have not been able to pursue consistent neither India policy nor Kashmir policy. And these inconsistencies have cost us and Kashmiris a lot. And today, it seems to me that we are waiting perhaps for some deus ex machina that something will happen to save us from this very hopeless situation. And this is not going to happen. My own feeling is that we are fast losing on Kashmir. Though Kashmiris themselves are resolved, determined, and they would never give up their legitimate, inalienable right to self-determination, they will continue doing whatever they can do. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, my feeling is that we have become complacent, and we have sort of given up on Kashmir. Hence, we do not see any concerted, coherent efforts on our part to even come up with a Kashmir policy which can be, which is tenable and which is sustainable. In my view, this pandemic, definitely India is taking advantage. Hindutva, we all know, it's about reviving the mythical empire of Bharatvarsh. And we all know what it is all about. But the point, as other distinguished speakers have made, as to how Pakistan should be countering India's policy. Because, you know, Hakim-e-Sheher ye soch ke chup baitha hai, sari basti ko basti se nikale kaise. The problem is with Pakistan, actually, I am somewhat disappointed that the way things should have been dealt with, we have not been able to rise to the plate. Whether it was President Pervez Musharraf, his 4-point formula, whether it was the government of Mr. Nawaz Sharif, the joint statement at UFA, and then following that, our agreement to focus mostly on issues of terrorism and not Jammu and Kashmir. And then this incumbent government, the incumbent Prime Minister welcoming Modi and encouraging the people of India to re-elect Modi because he would be better in the context of resolving the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. Perhaps, everything was revealed to us after 5th of August that BJP and RSS are fascist organizations. So this lack of, knowledge of history and what the Jammu and Kashmir issue is all about, uh, uh, it's so disappointing that even today, when this pandemic sort of gives us an opportunity to revisit the drawing board and sit together and formulate a long-term strategy. Uh, Perhaps we do have some tactics, but tactics without a strategy, is a sure way of, I mean, it's not going to work. So my point is that while we can keep on making hoary, meaningless statements here and there, upload tweets, that is not going to help. Kashmiris are still ready to make sacrifices, but Pakistan has not been up to the plate, unfortunately. Uh, Hindutva is an ideology, and Indians are working, the BJP government, the RSS, and their affiliate organizations like Hindu Mahasabha, Bajrang Dal, and you name any organization, they are working, even Congress for that matter. You must remember the 22nd February 1994 resolution of the Indian Parliament. So even that was very clear. And then the manifestos, election manifestos of the BJP in 2014 and 2019. So these, things have been very clear, but Pakistan, perhaps over the years, we have lost the institutional capacity to sustain any initiative. And to me, that is the biggest problem in Pakistan. Hence, we resort to making statements alone. For example, even after the 5th of August, we have put in place several mechanisms, but those mechanisms have somewhat gone, somewhere we do not know. Even the Kashmir cell meeting is no more convened. So we have lost interest. I fully understand that we do have limitations, but that doesn't mean that you start giving a short shrift to the important issue of Jammu and Kashmir. I fully agree with Ambassador Khokhar. There is no desire on the part of the Indian government to talk to us. And I think we should also be disabusing ourselves at this point in time that talks would really deliver anything. Talks or no talks, we should be very clear that Pakistan's policy has not worked so far. Whether it is the United Nations UN Security Council informal consultations there on the 16th of August, and then we again tried in December to hold exclusive informal consultations, but we utterly failed. But we projected those informal consultations in December as something historical happened in New York. Similarly, when OIC contact group meets, and this has been meeting for last 2-3 decades and issuing statements on Kashmir, and we projected those statements, resolutions as something remarkable happened, unprecedented. And now the Kashmiris will get their freedom. So it is this, kind of complacency. We become hostage of our own rhetoric, unfortunately, and start believing that these meaningless resolutions, speeches, remarks, or rhetoric would achieve or yield something concrete or tangible for us. That is not going to happen. I have been meeting Azad Jammu and Kashmir Prime Minister many times. I have met him many times, and we have discussed, and we have made practical proposals on every dimension of the Kashmir dispute: political, diplomatic, legal, and so on and so forth. Multilaterally, you would not be able to achieve anything unless you have bilateral, activity taking place. Unfortunately, and it pains me to say, our foreign office, our diplomats around the world have failed. You hardly see any of your ambassadors to be on the international media, attending think tanks, and putting forth our viewpoint across. So, I mean, and there is no, I do not see any urgency, any desire to really inject some vigor into our diplomacy when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. I do not know, but we do have ideas, suggestions. We have been sharing those ideas with the government at different levels, but nothing seems to be moving. This government too, in my view, has not come up with a proper, coherent, well-calibrated think-through response. And hence today, even after, 1 year is almost, 5th August is fast approaching. And after even one year, we are still thinking as to what should our strategy be. We still do not have any clarity as to how to deal with this situation. So that really pains me because and I can assure you, even if tomorrow BJP offers us to talk and sends its foreign secretary, we would immediately, we will be grabbing that opportunity without reflecting on such moves. Though there is no possibility of India engaging with Pakistan at this point in time, but we could have done many things post August 5. But we have failed, unfortunately. Still, I think, since the resolve in occupied Kashmir is there, that has not tapered off, and it will never taper off, in my view, because I have been meeting all the leaders of the Hurriyat, from Sayyid Gilani to Shabir Shah, Yasin Malik to Agha Hassan Mosavi, and the ordinary people of Jammu, occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And I know for a fact that their resolve, their determination cannot be suppressed, no matter what India does. The 8 million occupied Kashmiris are determined to continue fighting for their right to self-determination. But the point is that how Pakistan can help them. And I'm more worried about this particular aspect. Yes, India has taken advantage of this ongoing pandemic. And after 31st of March, now yesterday, they have come up with this notification vis-a-vis domicile. India will continue taking these steps. And we knew all along that this is going to happen. But the question is, Pakistan, unfortunately, does not have a clear strategy as to how to deal with this situation. And that is where, we need to put our heads together and come up with a solid, tenable thing. I mean, you can come up with unrealistic, because Pakistan had its own limitations, and I fully understand that. But still, Pakistan, if it did not have any limitations, then the entire situation would have been different. Since we do have limitations, that's why it has kind of become more challenging for Pakistan as to how to deal with these new ground realities. So I hope that Pakistan, this government, because time is of the essence, and if you start losing to India's illegal, because it is not only breach of resolutions or international law. India has violated its own constitution, its Article 367 and Article 2 of its own constitution by this Reorganization Act of 2019. So, but we cannot expect the Supreme Court of India to rectify the situation, because Hindutva is now so much, playing a dominant role. that the Indian Supreme Court has also become a partisan in this whole case. So we should not be counting on, even the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir should not be counting on. And what India or the BJP government will do is that with the passage of time, and as Pakistan continues to be, unable to do anything effectively, India will continue moving ahead. It's biding time, and it will not talk to Pakistan. Now, for us, the only ways left is to create internal pressure in occupied Kashmir, and also international pressure on India. So these are the two things which Pakistan should be thinking of as to how we can create political. And I'm one of those who strongly believe that while political struggle is important, but Kashmiris cannot give up or forgo the option of an armed struggle, because that is permitted in international law. There is a UNGA resolution 3312 of 1974, which very clearly articulates that how struggles for the right to self-determination have the right to carry out an armed struggle. And it is incumbent upon the international community to help such struggles, such armed struggles. And then we have to see as to how we can kind of inject more substance into our diplomacy internationally. We have been, we need to put our best people in important capitals. Unfortunately, what we have seen recently, that Dr. Lodhi was transferred from New York while, she was trying to build some support for the cause. So these, such steps, ill-considered steps, I would say, do harm our diplomacy. And we do not have the best people in major capitals, unfortunately, who are able to articulate our case effectively. And this is public diplomacy is no more there. And this is what we are, we have come to this pass, unfortunately, because of our own failures. We can always criticize India. They are pursuing their national interests. So important for us is to pursue our national interests the way we define them. And I would agree with Ambassador Khokhar, there is no national consensus as to what our Kashmir policy or our India policy should be. One day we say something and the next day we are totally at a different tangent. So if we keep on sending confusing messages, signals to India or to the rest of the world, then rest assured, then Pakistan, neither Pakistan, India policy nor our Kashmir policy would deliver. And then what happened, we have utterly failed, in my view, to mobilize and channelize overseas Pakistanis and Kashmiris. And these are the ways, by taking some constitutional measures in Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, some political measures, and some diplomatic efforts, consistent diplomatic efforts, both at the bilateral and multilateral levels. If we are expecting that we would be able to get something in New York or in Geneva or in Jeddah, for that matter, at OIC, without putting in efforts on our bilateral relations, we are living in a fool's paradise. Multilateralism doesn't function or operate in a vacuum. It is a reflection of your bilateral relations. Here we have, in my view, failed. Our ambassadors, our high commissioners have failed to reach out to their respective hosts in order to build support for this cause. And this is not, I would not blame this government particularly. This has been going on now for at least, in my view, 2 decades. that Pakistan has not been able to put its focus on Jammu and Kashmir. And we have been coming up with incoherent and inconsistent responses to whatever India has been doing. For example, after the adoption of the resolution in 1994 by the Indian Parliament, then we thought that on the 27th of February, we would present a resolution on human rights in occupied Kashmir at then United Nations Human Rights Commission. One day we proposed, tabled a resolution, a draft resolution, and the next day we withdrew it. So that, shows as to how our Kashmir policy has been suffering from trepidation, I would say. We have been apologetic, despite the fact that our stance is we are on a very strong wicket, legally and diplomatically. But somehow we have, we have not been able to summon enough courage to take risks in our diplomacy. I do not know for why, but there have been many occasions when Pakistan could have done far better, but unfortunately, Pakistan has not really, has not been able to rise to the challenge. And I'm still confident, despite all the problems which Pakistan government is facing. I'm still confident that if we put our act together, we can still achieve much, and we can still build some pressure on India, though it is quite late in the day. But we should never give up, because it's a principled position which Pakistan, and it is not a matter of about position. It is about 12 million Kashmiris. We need to think about them. It is not a territorial dispute. So Pakistan, and we all know that India is an relentless power. It will continue, BJP particularly, continue. And then rest assured that the BJP will win even in 2023 elections. And I can predict right now, because they're working on Ram Mandir very well, which will be constructed
time, times
2022, and in 2023 BJP will be re-elected, and Prime Minister Modi will continue to be the Prime Minister of India till 2029. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now we will go to Dr. Muhammad Khan. Dr. Muhammad Khan is professor of the Department of Politics and International Relations and the International Islamic University, Islamabad. And his topic is India's false allegations on Pakistan endeavor to launch another false flag operation. As we know that these days even the Prime Minister is talking a lot about the intended false flag operation. So Dr. Muhammad Khan will touch upon that topic, and after that we'll go on the question answer session.
Thank you very much, Jana Khalid, Jafri. Thank you, panelists, and thank you, the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, the last speaker has to say very less, because it is always very less for him. But let me tell you that in recent months, Pakistan has been frequently warning the international community, the major powers, and United Nations about the intended Indian false flag operations in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Indeed, there is a history of the Indian false flag operation, which is smartly used over the years against Pakistan and to defame the Kashmiri struggle for their right of self-determination. From the beginning of 21st century, India has indeed conducted over a dozen small and the large-scale false flag operations. A realistic assessment of Indian false flag operation would reveal that a lot has gone in conceiving, planning, and execution of these politically motivated, deceptive, overt operations. Since 2000, there has been a systematic and persistent conduct of false flag operations by India. And those indeed what have been the differences, that selection of the target, it has been the selection of the location, of the pattern and intended magnitude of these operations. Those were the different, otherwise there was a smooth pattern. All these false flag operations were planned and conducted to achieve some specific and some broad objectives, depending upon the prevailing political and the security situation at regional and global level. Whereas the specific objective pertaining to each false flag operations were different, depending upon situation and the desired results, the broad objectives have been constant and uniform. I would just say that the broad objectives of India with regard to the false flag operations were alienating and relegating Pakistan regionally and globally, attempting to declare Pakistan as a terrorist state, economic exploitation of the Pakistan, both directly and indirectly, and currently it is use of the FATF, creating hatred against the Pakistani military and the Pakistani ISI, waging hybrid warfare within Pakistan, exploiting the various fault lines Pakistan has, whether these are the sub-nationalistic or otherwise sectarian for that matter. Then there is the ethnic dimension also. Then targeting the very ideology of the Pakistan. And over and above all this, that India wanted to project itself as an emerging power from these all false flag operations. These broad objectives, they are indeed intended long-term goals. They are meant for the long-term goals India has been pursuing through its political influences all over the world and through its diplomatic overtures. Ladies and gentlemen, then the specific objectives India plans to attain through these false flag operations, they are short and the medium-term goals, while exploiting a specific situation in its favor. These are deceptive overt measures aimed at diverting the attentions from an inauspicious domestic socio-political environment, or else to avert the mounting international critique against Indian actions like the human rights violations, or what it has been doing in the form of alienating the minorities within India. In the past 2 decades, most of these false flag operations India conducted, they are either Kashmir specific or aimed to target the Muslim, definitely both with the involvement, or you can say that aiming at Pakistan. For example, let me say that in March 2000, 35 were massacred in the Itisinghpura area of district Anantnag, Indian occupied Kashmir. And this operation, false flag operation, was launched at the eve when the former US president, he was visiting India. And he visited India for the 5 days with a 5-hour stopover in the Pakistan. But remember that it was a pre-9/11 false flag operation by India, aiming to achieve 2 broad objectives. One, the ongoing Kashmiris movement in the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir is more of a terrorism, rather a justified movement for their right of self-determination. And 2, that Pakistan is behind this entire game and saying that Pakistan is sponsoring the terrorism. Through this well-planned and professionally executed false flag operation, India convinced President Clinton and rest of the world that Kashmiri's revolt is actually ideology-driven, aimed to terrorize non-Muslims and also targeting Indian security forces, which is a Pakistani proxy against India. Since the incident of 9/11 was theorized upon the hypothesis that Muslims are behind the incident of 9/11, therefore they need to be penalized. Upon this development, India immediately cashed on this year-old dogmatic projection of indigenous Kashmiri struggle as terrorism, while portraying Pakistan as its sponsor.
Sir, I think there is some issue with the internet of Dr. Muhammad Khan. So we will let him continue his speech once he will come back. Now we have Lieutenant General retired Masood Aslam with us, and he wants to give certain comments. General Masood Aslam, sir. Sir, you have to unmute it. Sir, आपको unmute करना होगा sir. Sir, screen के ऊपर आप देखें. Screen के ऊपर.
Yes, now it's
yes.
okay. I've got
Yes,
it. I've got it.
You can speak up, sir. Now
Thank you. Thank you very much, Khalid, and thank you very much, CGSS, for arranging this excellent webinar. It was a treat to listen to a galaxy of very seasoned diplomats. I'm including my, I would say, one of my mentors, Khalid Maqbool, as a diplomat, because he was in Washington, D.C. at the peak of the first intifada, that is 91 to 94. He was the defense attaché over there, and I think he must have had the best of the time to defend Pakistan and to understand, because he saw the rise, and then certainly we had to clamp down the insurgency on Kashmir. Anyhow, so ladies and gentlemen, what I have come to the conclusion was, as highlighted again and again, that the story of Kashmir is a story of missed opportunities and a bridge too far. I would say very aptly brought out, articulated by the President and Ambassador Sardar Masood. We see there is no primacy of Kashmir in our national narrative. Very beautifully highlighted by Dr. Lodhi, that we have been able to shake up the word conscience a little, but if we want them to do something, that totally depends upon our show of resolve to the extent we are going to support this thing. Again, Ambassador Basit and Ambassador Khokhar very clearly highlighted the weaknesses and flaws in our Kashmir policy. And I'm reminded of Kissinger in 2007, while analyzing the American policies in Afghanistan and the efforts of war on terror. He said, America needs a policy, not alibis in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, it holds very much true for us. We have a lot of alibis for our inability to really pursue our objectives for Kashmir right from 47 to date. In 47, it was Kashmiriyat which carried the day. Our struggles in 47, 65, and 99, they are all solo efforts. Today, Pakistan, we in Pakistan and the Kashmiris in the Indian occupied Kashmir are actually almost in a wilderness. It is a rudderless ship, and unfortunately, we really don't have much to say. What we need to do, I'm sorry to say that even at this webinar, we were afraid of openly mentioning it. We are talking of the approach, which is essentially a soft approach. We are not talking of some sort of a calibration of our effort of a soft and a hard approach. So to that end, the questions which most of them have been partially answered, but to the President of the Azad Kashmir, if he's still online, or somebody else could say, because you see, we talk of our inability, our lack of capacity to really mobilize the international community, especially vis-a-vis the Indian economic might. But as far as Azad Kashmir is concerned, where do we see Azad Kashmir as a base for the people, for the really gaining of the objectives of the people, or the right of self-determination for the people of Kashmir? In Azad Kashmir, at the political level, unfortunately, we are talking of the national consensus, but even in Azad Kashmir, there has been no consensus. There is no one voice for the people of Kashmir. Number two, the people of Pakistan, unfortunately, the younger generation, especially in the universities, today to be honest, have no awareness. They have no real affinity with the cause of Kashmir. And a lot of people, a lot of voices are heard. What else can we do for the Kashmiris? Should we really destroy Pakistan? क्या हम पाकिस्तान को तबाह कर दें कश्मीर के लिए? ये बातें जो हैं, क्या ये आज़ाद कश्मीर की गवर्नमेंट का काम नहीं है कि ये मीडिया पे पाकिस्तान के और पाकिस्तान की यूनिवर्सिटीज के बीच में इसको जो है इसको उजागर करे? दुनिया में तो कश्मीरी डायस्पोरा के साथ तो उनको प्लेटफॉर्म प्रोवाइड करना उनका मेन रोल था. The second question which I have is कि क्या हमारी पॉलिसी जो सी है ये कब बनेगी? कब हमारी कश्मीर के ऊपर ये डिसाइड होगा कि हमारा असल ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या है? Indians have an outline very aptly highlighted by Basit साहब. You see, हिंदू राष्ट्र के बीच में जो उन्होंने सोचा है उसके स्टेप वाइज उनकी ऑब्जेक्टिव्स हैं. उन्होंने डेमोग्राफिक चेंजेस करके अभी जो शोर है, अभी जो इस वक्त अपॉर्चुनिटी है वो ये है कि अब फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम इट इज द एंटायर कश्मीरी पॉपुलेशन which is the Kashmiris in the valley as well as outside, their identity has been threatened, their identity has been attacked. So that is where we need to take advantage of. और ये जो अभी नया उन्होंने शुरू किया है of domicile and demo, इसके ऊपर सबको unite किया जा सकता है, and this can become the voice for getting the right to self-determination. What should be our aim? We need to follow what Dr. Riaz Khokhar साहब और दूसरे बता चुके हैं. और until and unless there is a very fine calibration of both soft and hard approach, India and the world is not going to look towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comments. And now we would go to Lieutenant General Naim Khalid Lodhi, who's the former Federal Minister for Defense, for his comments. General Naim Lodhi, sir.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Just to save time, I'll straight away go on my assessment of what Indian plans are. Whatever they have done, they have already done. I will not repeat that. Now what they are doing is that they are crushing the resistance movement and keeping us engaged from east and west. Naturally, obviously, just to keep our heads down. This is what is happening now. Their next step would be, which will, in my opinion, in my assessment, would come somewhere in November, December, January next year. They will occupy small chunks of AK and threaten Gilgit-Baltistan, creating a fait accompli situation for us. Afterwards, they will accept US arbitration. And last, they will assimilate Indian occupied Kashmir completely. This is their plan, in my humble opinion. Our decision makers have to answer just 3 questions. Question number 1, are the Kashmiri freedom fighters or the resistance movement fighting their own war? It is only about Kashmir, or it is also a war of Pakistan? Question number 2, whether we want to allow India to bleed us slowly and continuously, or we should react to stem such efforts of theirs. Question number 3, do we want to go down in history as a nuclear power that could not even secure its vital interest? Thank you very much. What we should be doing, I think a lot has been done. I'm very clear about it, that what it should be done. And I'm also quite confident that we are capable of doing a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, you have also raised some questions, and General Masood Aslam has also raised some questions. So first we would request Dr. Maleeha Lodhi to speak on the questions raised by Khalid named Lodhi and General Masood Aslam. Dr. Maleeha Lodhi, please.
Have you unmuted me? Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I mean, I think I can't address all the questions that have been raised, but I think the one thing that we need to keep in view, and that has not really come up so sharply in our discussion so far, is that India, as General Lodhi, who's not a relative of mine, but I have enormous respect for him, as he's pointed out, India is trying to engage us on multiple fronts. And I think what we need to keep in mind is that India has also stepped up, and I plan to write about this, it's also stepped up its covert war against Pakistan. So I think we have the overt means in which they're engaging us. There's the line of control, there is, occupied Kashmir itself. And so, I think what worries me is the unilateral form of governance we have in our country today. What we may confront will require the kind of national unified effort that only comes when the federal government brings everybody together and everybody buys into what is the nature of the challenge, and then you address it. To pursue national interest, you have to have sometimes very strange bedfellows. That's life. That's how it is. And I think that is the need and the requirement. I think Abdul, Basit, Riaz, Khokhar, others have made this point rightly on Kashmir, that we need to have everyone involved in this. This cannot be run through one department or section of either the foreign ministry or some other stakeholder institution. This has to be a national effort and predicated on national consensus and a clear understanding what the nature of the challenge is. So, unless nations are united, they cannot confront any challenge. You can see how we're confronting the pandemic right now. I don't want to divert attention from what we're discussing. But, countries that have successfully dealt with the pandemic are countries that have been united, not countries that have been divided by either partisan politics or by other efforts, where you say, only I know how to deal with the challenge. So I think for me, this is a critical, this is not a desired goal. This is a necessity. It's essential that we have everyone on board as we confront this challenge. And I think to understand the various dimensions of this challenge, people need to be taken into confidence. Even as the pandemic is progressing, there is nothing to stop anybody from keeping people briefed, whether they're parliamentarians or they're important writers or they influence, the people who influence policy. You need to, keep people abreast of what's happening, because we're also confronted, part of this covert war, as I know that you know this much better than I do. Part of the covert war is of course fought through the means of information. Huge. Fake news is, with us. All sorts of things are, we have to confront all sorts of things. And in this, this used to be traditionally called a propaganda war. Now it's become much more sophisticated. Now we need to deal with all of that. So I think a stepped up covert war by India, the intention to, further intensify and mount pressure on Pakistan so that Pakistan becomes a pliant neighbor, something that India has always desired. We need to have people understanding this cannot be, as I said, ye silo mein nahi ho sakta. So I'll stop there because I went on much too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will request Lieutenant General Khalid Maqbool to kindly give his comments on the questions raised by General Masood Aslam.
मैं दो बातें कहना चाहता हूँ. पहली बात तो ये कि मेरे ख्याल में पाकिस्तान में एक बहुत बड़ी मुहिम चलनी चाहिए जिसमें हमें ये पहचान आनी चाहिए कि पाकिस्तान हमारे लिए कितनी बड़ी नेमत है और आज के दौर में पाकिस्तान को कौन से खतरात लाहक हैं. खा वो आने वाली क्लाइमेट चेंज का हो. मैडम लोधी मेरी एम्बेसडर रही हैं, व्हाट अ क्लास एम्बेसडर शी वाज. ये फेक न्यूज़ का इसको नया थ्रेट कहा जा रहा है, या दूसरे और जो आपको ओवर्ट और कोवर्ट थ्रेट पूरी दुनिया की तरफ से, खुसूसन हिंदुस्तान की तरफ से आ रहे हैं. मेरे ख्याल में हम इसको सिर्फ फौजियों की एक मशवरा ना समझें. हर हमारी बहस में ये चीज़ शामिल होनी चाहिए ताकि एक आदमी को एहसास हो कि यार अगर हमने कोविड से बच गए हैं तो अगले क्लाइमेट में क्या मसला आएगा, अगले सेहत में क्या मसला आएगा. मेरा ज़्यादा तवज्जो है जो जनरल मसूद फ्रेंड एंड ओल्ड कलीग, और मेरे ख्याल में पहले भी बात हुई कि असल कश्मीर को जो नई जिंदगी दी है वो कश्मीरियों की शहादतों ने दी है. वो हमारे लेक्चरों ने या टीवी वगैरह ने काम किया है, पर असल जो कुव्वत और तहरीक मिली है कश्मीर की जद्दोजहद को, वो कश्मीर के वो नौजवान, वो बच्चे हैं जो घरों में या बाहर जंगलों में लड़ रहे हैं, और उनकी माएँ हैं जिन्होंने ये कसम खाई है कि हम तुम्हें दूध माफ कर देंगे, तुमने हिंदुस्तानियों के खिलाफ लड़ना है. ये उनकी जिद्दोजहद की वजह से मसला दोबारा उभरा है. बाकी लोगों का कहाँ इसमें शिरकत है, इतनी नहीं है. अच्छा, अब उसको कैसे सपोर्ट करना है, वो बात करते वक्त 1990 में हम घबराते थे स्टेट स्पॉन्सर्ड टेररिज्म. देखिए, अगर अब इसको दुनिया में मैं पढ़ा हूँ, अल जजीरा, BBC, CNN, CFR, सब लोग कह रहे हैं कि हिंदुस्तान, ये जो कश्मीर की जद्दोजहद है ये एक मुकामी जद्दोजहद है और ये दूसरे लोगों का इसमें इतना काम नहीं है. अगर इसको दुनिया में आहिस्ता आहिस्ता लेजिटिमेसी आती है, फिर हमें दुनिया को ये बताने में डरना नहीं चाहिए कि देखें हमारे अवाम की इसमें बहुत बड़ी एक नस्लों पुरानी इसमें अकीदत है. एक वक्त आएगा हम रोक नहीं सकेंगे. आप हमें आज ये क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिस्ट, सॉरी, हमें सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक से डरा रहे हैं, FATF से डरा रहे हैं, ठीक है. ये अगर बात अगले 6 महीने में होती है, हमारे बस में नहीं रहेगा. दुनिया में किसी फौज ने अपने लोगों को गोलियों से नहीं मारा. हम लोगों को बॉर्डर, कश्मीर के बॉर्डर पे नहीं रोक सकेंगे. और दूसरा, हमें एक ये बात दुनिया के सामने लानी चाहिए, अगर हमने रोक भी लिया तो दुनिया के जहादी इसको तैयार बैठे हैं. अब खबरें आ रही हैं, हिंदुस्तान खुद कह रहा है खुरासान आईसिस आ रही है, लोग तालिबान के ऊपर ये बात डाल रहे हैं. सही है गलत मुझे नहीं मालूम. तो बातें हमें दुनिया को बतानी चाहिए. एक तो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता दुनिया भर के वो लोग जो जुल्म के खिलाफ खड़ा होना चाहते हैं वो कश्मीर में जाएंगे, और दूसरे ये हमने तमाम अपनी कानूनी लवाजमात पूरे कर लिए हैं. हम इस बस में नहीं रहेंगे कि अपने लोगों को साथ रोका जाए. इसके साथ साथ अगर दुनिया में ये बात साबित हो गई, और जो साबित हो रही है, दुनिया का कोई मुल्क कोई बड़ा लिखारी नहीं लिख रहा, इंक्लूडिंग वो अमेरिकन लिखारी जो हमारे खिलाफ लिखते थे कि कश्मीर की तहरीक आज़ादी जो है ये इंडिजिनस नहीं है या कश्मीरी या हिंदुस्तानी जुल्म नहीं कर रहे. ये दोनों बातें सारी दुनिया कह रही है. हिंदुस्तानी फौज जुल्म कर रही है, ये जो तहरीक है ये खालिस्तान जो है ये मुकामी तहरीक है. अगर ये दो बातें हम दुनिया को ये अपनी डिप्लोमेसी, मीडिया कम्युनिकेशन के जरिए इसको फैला सके, तो फिर अगला मेरे ख्याल में कदम ये होगा, हमें स्मार्ट तरीके ढूंढने पड़ेंगे कि इस तहरीक को जिंदा रखें, इसको मजबूत करें. 20 साल बाद वो अमेरिका जो 9/11 में मैं और हम सब लोग गए थे, मैडम मलिया को मालूम है, यहाँ पे आके मैं डरा के गया था 9/11 के बाद, वही अमेरिका आ जाकर हमें दोबारा मिन्नतें कर रहा है कि इनसे हमारी सुलह कराओ। ये कोई, ना तालिबान ने इंटरनेशनल मीडिया की वॉर जीती है, ना तालिबान ने मल्टीलैटरल डायलॉग किया है, ना तालिबान ने यूएनओ के सामने अपना केस पर जीता है। तालिबान ने जाने देकर और बंदूक उठाकर दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी ताकत से ये केस जीता है। कश्मीरी अगर अपना खून बहा रहे हैं, उनकी माएं उनको शहादत देने से नहीं रोक रही। कश्मीरी औरतें घरों के सामने आज पहरा दे रही हैं, उन्होंने ट्रेंचेस खोदी हुई हैं। हमें डिप्लोमेसी, मीडिया वॉर दुनिया के सामने पेश करने के बाद दुनिया को ये बताना होगा, आहिस्ता आहिस्ता हम मजबूर हो जाएंगे। इस जिद्दोजहद में पाकिस्तान अमली तौर पर शरीक होने से पीछे नहीं हट सकता। शुक्रिया।
Thank you very much, sir. Now we have a student of Defense and Strategic Studies from the from University of Punjab, Zunaira Khan. Zunaira, your mic is unmuted. You can ask the question, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I have two questions regarding this. My first question is, does the notion of Akhand Bharat, which has been heard in the halls of history since the invasion of Pakistan, satisfy the interest of India through the occupation of Kashmir? And number two is, why the effective tool of United Nations in the form of collective security could not produce fruitful results despite the high slogans of human rights today? Thank you very much.
So for the first question, we would first request Ambassador Basit to comment, and then Ambassador Riaz Khokhar. Ambassador Basit sir, आपको अपना mic unmute करना होगा. Mic unmute करें.
As far Akhand Bharat is concerned, because I have lived in India, so has Ambassador Khokhar. We all know that generally speaking, the people of India are not really too much concerned about that. It is a philosophy or ideology which stems from the philosophy of Dr. Savarkar. So the BJP, RSS, they have adopted that idea. But overall, I think the people in India have moved on. Akhand Bharat, if at all it were to be implemented or to be achieved, then that would not only include Pakistan, and then it would also include Bangladesh, and then perhaps Nepal at some stage. I do not know where will it end. So whether they're espousing this ideology, the RSS, BJP and other BJP affiliate organizations, but they all know that it is not no more realizable. But obviously for domestic political reasons, because what happens in the electoral system, that the BJP needs only 31 to 32% of the total vote cast. And they, through political maneuvering, do that, because over the last, last 10 years, I would say, the Muslim vote or Muslims, which constitute about 15% of the Indian population, they have become totally irrelevant when it comes to the electoral dynamics of India. And that is, the biggest setback, I think, which has happened during the last 10 years. So Akhand Bharat, yes, as a concept that is there, but I think given the new dynamics, new ground realities, that is unrealizable. But as far as occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, it goes without saying that India would go to the hilt to implement, to get its objectives attained in that region. But we have to be slightly careful because, I was hearing about 3-4 months ago, before the pandemic, that Pakistan was also interested to promote religious tourism in Azad Jammu and Kashmir and open Sharda Peeth for Hindu pilgrims. On the one hand, Kartarpur, in my view, after 5th of August was a huge mistake. And we are if committing another mistake by opening Sharda Peeth for Hindu pilgrims. That would again kind of dilute our Kashmir policy. So we need to be very, very careful. These small steps do create problems in the long term. And this is what our policy, unfortunately, has been. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now on the same question, we would like to have comments from Ambassador Riaz Khokhar, please.
I think Akhand Bharat for the time being is a distant dream. Their immediate objective is to turn India into a Hindu state, and I think they are doing extremely well. This is the real India. I mean, we were befooled by the past Indian leadership. In the ultimate analysis, they all really believed in Hinduism because it's a country of 83% of the population of India is Hindu. I think I'd like to collective security where the big powers want to do things they do. Like for instance, East Timor. They were able to get a plebiscite done, and it was mainly because East Timor was Christian. Similarly, South Sudan. Sudan was divided. South Sudan again, they succeeded because they were Christians. Palestinians and Kashmiris are in the same situation. Merciless approach by the occupying forces to kill, to maim, and the genocide continues. And clearly there is a certain level of support that both Delhi and Tel Aviv enjoy from some of the major powers. So I'm not so sure that the UN will eventually be able to do very much other than the fact that they have all the major powers have to agree. At the moment, you really have a support of the Chinese, but that's not enough. Russia is somewhat neutral. France, Britain, and USA, they are in the same maybe same basket. I want to answer, General Saab, some of the questions that have been raised. Yes, the Kashmiris are also fighting our war. I mean, Lake Dal is full of blood, and so is River Jhelum. The question is, how long can they continue? How long? It's a very small population. Secondly, India is bleeding us. They will keep up the pressure on the LOC. They will keep up they will continue with the acquisition of arms, which means that they would try and engage us in some kind of an arms race. So I think they don't really have to try very much because we are doing pretty well ourselves. I mean, look at the state of the economy and look at the sort of political atmosphere in the country. Nuclear power, I don't think we will fail, but we have to have conviction. The question is, if you are in a situation of being in between a rock and a hard place, will you be able to use it? Will the international community, big powers, allow you to use it? But I believe that India has to be given a message, a very clear message, that if we go, we'll take you with us. That's the bottom line. If that's not done, I think they will continue to play games with us. I mean, Dr. Lodhi has very rightly said, overt activities. If you were an Indian strategist sitting in the Prime Minister's house, Prime Minister's office, what would you be suggesting to him? Weaken Pakistan from the inside. So I would say that we have to be very clear. We have to make up our mind that as a nation, as a collective nation, a decision on what our policy on Kashmir should be. And everybody should be on board. Nobody should be allowed to get off it. So I recommend, Dr. Lodhi has also said that we need some kind of a clear-cut national consensus, a policy that has a strategy and then tactics.
Okay, we'll go back to Ambassador Basit. Ambassador Basit has to say something. Ambassador Basit, sir, yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, Ambassador Khokhar Saab has made very valid points. I remember I met Ajit Doval many times during my stint in New Delhi. And I would also kind of provoke him to discuss his notorious defensive offense doctrine. And we all know that India has been for years now trying to destabilize Pakistan so that Pakistan doesn't grow economically as well. And that has been Indian policy for years now. But, you know, look at our response. We arrested Commander Kulbhushan Jadhav in March 2016. And then, you know, again, bungled up the entire thing. And even today, in my view, when you have a very strong that India has been involved in weakening Pakistan, destabilizing Pakistan, we have been kind of waffling on even Kulbhushan Jadhav as to how to deal with him, let alone to how to have a new or a calibrated Kashmir policy. So we, in my view, over the years, and I will be very honest with you, our civilian institutions have lost the capacity, in my view, to come up with tenable, plausible solutions to problems. And that is the biggest problem in our country. And then the lack of leadership, unfortunately. So all these things put together, I mean, you know, take the initiative away from us, and we are not able to step up to the plate.
Thank you very much, sir. And now we will go to again to Zonera to repeat her question, which was for Dr. Maleeha Lodhi. Zonera, can you repeat the second part of the question again?
Yes, sir, sure. That is, let me repeat it. Why the effective tool of United Nations in the form of collective security could not produce fruitful results despite the high slogans of human rights today?
Thank you. Thank you, Zanera. I think that question is answered by 3 words or 3 letters, 3 words: big power politics. I mean, I said this before, and I think Riaz has also, you know, explained this. You know, it's the UN is not a supranational organization. It is an intergovernmental organization where the structure of the United Nations is configured in such a way that it hands decisive power on conflict resolution to 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Now, non-permanent members also assume an importance when a particular permanent member wants to mobilize support and another permanent member is opposing. That is also something that we have to keep in mind. But ultimately, the P5 decide or divide. And then either an issue is resolved or it is not resolved. And I think, you know, the issue of occupied Kashmir has obviously suffered from this big power politics, because there has been no big power consensus on the need to address this issue, except in, you know, issuing statements from time to time. But obviously that's not a resolution of the Kashmir by any stretch of the imagination. So I think, you know, I think the UN is coming up to its 75th anniversary now. I mean, I don't think it's going to meet in September because of the pandemic, but 75 years of the UN should be an occasion for all world leaders to come and reflect on your questions on era, which is that the UN was created to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, as it's, you know, and it has. There's been no world war, there's been no conflict of that kind. So it has performed that purpose. But it has obviously not come up to the expectations of people. And I think that's why the UN is going through a crisis of confidence, especially amongst publics around the world, not just amongst our public, because our public also questions, why the UN is unable to implement its own resolutions. Resolutions are adopted so that they are implemented. Otherwise, why adopt them? So, these resolutions have been there, they've not been implemented. As I explained before in my own short presentation, it's the configuration of these powers and the way that they have aligned their interests with those of India that has prevented these resolutions from being implemented. Now, that's the state of play. But, like Basit, like Riaz, like the others on this panel, I believe that for us, not doing anything is not an option. All of this should urge us to step up, to have imaginative policies, and to use, as one of the panelists also rightly pointed out, to use both hard and soft power that we have at our disposal to press our point and to further our foreign policy interests. But I think, our foreign policy, I'm afraid, is just too limited to one or two countries. And then when a crisis breaks and we find that we needed to have multiple relationships and multiple options in our foreign policy, obviously we are found wanting then. Now, again, this critique is not meant really to, as I said, it's not a lament. This critique is meant as, it should goad us into doing much more and much more imaginatively. And I think I agree entirely with Basit Saab that, civilian institutional capacity is very weak. It needs to be built up. And we cannot deal with these issues in silos. I mean, I can tell you one little experience of mine. On Afghanistan, I needed to speak in the Security Council every 3 months because there was a 3-month debate. It's the most important diplomatic forum, as you all know, in the world, where you articulate your country's position on Afghanistan is a core interest of Pakistan. Not once did I get any input from the foreign ministry. I mean, I used to, in great desperation, beg and plead them to send me some points so I know, roughly the direction in which we would like the world to hear us. Other stakeholders did send me inputs, but I feel sad. This is not meant as a critique, but it's meant more as a, we lack that capacity and we really need to rebuild it, and we need leadership. And we also need a full-time foreign minister. We can't have a foreign minister who's foreign minister for part of the week, and he is, doing parliament for the other part of the week and holding press conferences in Multan about occupied Kashmir. I mean, you've got to be a little more serious than that. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. We have lots of other questions and our panelists from our panelists, but since we have overshoot the time for 1 hour, we were supposed to finish at 1:30, but now it's 2:30. So I would just request General Khalid Jafri to sum up and thank all the panelists. General Khalid Jafri.
Thank you, Khalid. It's been a very, very interesting webinar. It was possible because, we did not want that COVID-19 should overtake this extremely crucial issue. Just a few very quick points. First of all, I think we must also remember that Kashmir, of course, is a very important issue from all angles, but the water, I think, remains again a very crucial element of our policy. When the Qaid said that Kashmir hamari sheher hai, this is what he meant. Secondly, we must remember that if we let down the Kashmiris now, after having brought them to this level and after Modi has provided us with this opportunity, if we let them down now, they may become permanent enemies. We can let them down. I think China, since China has a stake in Kashmir,
we should encourage the Chinese, but probably some more pressure on India is required. We must also, there are questions asked about the Shimla Agreement. Why did we not abrogate or pull out of the Shimla Agreement when the status of Jammu and Kashmir was changed? Nobody has been able to, whenever I have asked somebody this question, so then of course, very discreetly and in a very surreptitious manner, they are now trying to destabilize Pakistan, and they are following the same policy which they did in East Pakistan. They are trying to get into our education system. There are certain books which were probably printed in India and which were there in the syllabuses in Pakistan, and the map of Kashmir was shown as part of India. I think the case is in court. Why went for a seminar? Thus, we have always been asked a question. The youth do not know the importance. Sorry. Sorry. The youth of Pakistan need to be re-educated about Kashmir, about what the policy has been and what it should be. And we must also remember that we must always talk to the Indians from a position of strength. This has always been the case when talking to Indians. Otherwise, they don't understand. They don't take you seriously. So, sorry to cut it short. Thank all the panelists for a very educative webinar which we had. And we will, inshallah, continue in the same spirit in the future also. COVID-19 or no COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And at the end, I would like to thank all the panelists, especially Ambassador Basit, General Khalid Maqbool, Ambassador Riaz, Khokhar, Dr. Maleeha Lodhi, and Dr. Muhammad Khan. Thank you very much for being with us, sir. Now we will close this session. Thank you very much.